very timely hearing. We may have to tap into AI to figure out how to elect a Speaker of the House. We're going to have a hearing tomorrow on AI and the energy sector. I chair the Energy Subcommittee, so I look forward to that. On July 13th, 2023, the People's Republic of China issued final measures aimed at regulating generative AI services, such as ChatGPT, to the Chinese public. Under these provisions, content providers must uphold the integrity of state power and ensure the development of products aligning with the socialist agenda of the Chinese Communist Party. These actions, along with censorship and the CCP's growing control of a private sector, have stifled domestic growth and innovation. While this committee recognizes the need for a framework to address AI's potential risks to ensure responsible development and deployment, how do we also ensure that AI systems align with our own democratic values while promoting a fair and open regulatory environment? So for Ms. Espinel, you've talked about the different roles of companies in privacy and AI legislation. Tell me more about those roles and why legislation should distinguish between them.
So first I'll say, I think it is very possible to have regulation that leads to responsible AI and takes a different approach than other countries. And I think the United States being a leader on what a regulatory approach to AI that reflects our values, I think that's critically important. One of the things that it also needs to do is recognize the different roles that you refer to. There are companies that develop AI, there are companies that use AI. Our companies do both, and there should be obligations on both. But they should reflect the fact that whether you're training a system, creating a system, or using a system, you're going to have access to different information. And importantly, you're going to be able to take different kinds of steps to identify risks and then fix those risks. So having obligations for both and having impact assessments that will give companies a tool to identify what the risks are and then importantly go out and fix those risks is critically important.
Yeah, thank you for that. Many privacy laws around the world in the U.S. In the U.S. statutes governing privacy and security of financial and health information distinguish between controller versus a processor in order to recognize the different roles they play in the ecosystem and tailor responsibilities accordingly. Why should Congress support maintaining this distinction in federal privacy legislation? That question's to you too.
For the same reason, because whether you are a service provider that is processing data, so for example, if you are a grocery store and you are collecting data about your consumers, you should and be responsible for making decisions about how to limit use of that data, for example. If you're a service provider that is processing that data, you often will not have access to it, and we don't want service providers to have access to it. That would undermine privacy. So that's a practical example of why those distinctions, which again, this committee has recognized and has been recognized, I think, in 126 privacy laws around the world, right? Yeah. Is important. And so commend you for the work on that.
Yeah, and if I could add just one small point to that, and I agree with everything Ms. Espinel said, but she works for an association of the best companies. And they are. And sometimes,
let the record reflect.
Fine. And if you don't have a standard or a floor, then the companies that aren't the best companies, and sometimes even the companies that are almost the best companies, they go down to the bottom because they're at a competitive disadvantage. And so at the FTC, we went after a lot of scammers, and they would come into my office, or companies that engaged in deception. And they weren't bad companies, but they would say, yeah, I would like to protect consumer data this much. But if I did that, we couldn't earn money because everybody else is at a lower level. And that's why you need a privacy baseline, and that's one reason
we're going to move on. I've heard concerns about how AI-generated content using profiling from individuals' image and voice without acquiring consent. While this committee has been focused on privacy and data security for some time, we've also focused on NIL and how it impacts people such as college athletes. To that end, I'm curious if you see issues beyond privacy like property right protection, image protection, whatever, as an essential part of what Congress should be addressing when tackling AI policy. And I don't care who answers it. We've got 45 seconds.
Well, I think there are important issues that are raised here. I think one of the things that Congress could think about is whether or not a right of publicity at a federal level would be helpful here. There are rights of publicity at the state law, but again, not all states have those laws. There's not one sort of federal standard for that. So a suggestion would be that Congress consider creating a federal right of publicity to address some of those concerns.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I've seen some videos recently where image of someone was taken and AI-generated content of that person speaking something that they never said. And how that could be used in the political realm or against adversaries for blackmail, other things. even putting college athletes and students in bad positions where they've got to say that wasn't me, it looked real, and it's scary. And with that, we're always concerned about the privacy of American citizens.